Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Egberto Will is your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. We have a long show. We have a great guest, so I need to get into it right away. Lee Camp discusses, title of the show today. Lee Camp discusses America's trouble, election, COVID-19, schools, and more. Comedian satirist Lee Camp discusses various issues confronting America, his new book, Bullet Points and Punchlines. We also discuss back to school under COVID-19. Back to school. Are you guys ready to go back to school? Are you ready to put your life at risk? Are you ready to hope that your politicians make sure that those who are going back to work actually do the right thing to protect not only their students but their employees? Actually, look, my wife drives for the school district. They better not mess with and that's what it talks about in every single person here. Personalize what's occurring, folks. Personalize what's occurring. Everybody has a mother, a brother, a wife, an auntie, and everybody going back to school or going back into this society. Make sure that your government, the people who work for you, protect that which is of yours. And if we start to think that way, we won't go through the clownishness that we see many on the right. I don't have to wear this. The selfishness of saying, well, I want my freedom. Well, what about the freedom for others, my friend? Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. What matter is what it is. What matter is science. What matter is how we do things. So if you start thinking that way, if you start thinking the other person first, which is, for those of you who are Christians, the evangelicals who are some of the worst proponents of doing the right thing in these days, just think about what Jesus would do. Think about what the Lord, your Savior, would do. Don't sit back and get your fellow man killed, because that is what many of you are doing. They're ready teachers because they spend that much time concentrated among kids, or dead because folks didn't take the appropriate actions. Do you want that on your head, on your mind? We also discuss the advice for Biden given by a pundit, good pundit that's been out there giving some good information, and much more. So folks, Lee Camp is the host of Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp on RT America. Whenever you say RT America, Russian TV, oh my God. Here's the thing about it. Nobody would pick this guy up on regular TV, right? Because he had too many good things to say. He had too much to say about our corporatocracy. We don't have to agree with somebody eye to eye, full stop. But you know what we talk about here on Politics Done Right? We bring people from the left, the right, the middle, the center, everywhere, everybody. Every single American in this country has a voice on Politics Done Right. Because the only people that don't have a voice on Politics Done Right are those people who overtly and will overtly try to get somebody else hurt or promote the demeaning of others overtly. That doesn't get a place here, but everybody has a home at Politics Done Right. So we're going to have a great show for you today. Lee Camp is the host of Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp on RT America. He created the Common Censored podcast along with Eleanor Goldfield, who we've had on this show several times as well, which focuses on grassroots activism. She's a young woman who's a hell of an activist as well. Lee Camp is the author of a new book called Bullet Points and Punchlines. It's a compilation of many of the articles that he's done, but it's a lot deeper than that, so check that out. We have some links in our blogs as well as in the blog specific to his show that will lead you to get the book. Later we discuss the evilness of President Trump, as he would do anything to force people back to school without giving them the funding that is necessary to ensure that going back to school can be done safely. But folks, let's get busy. I was going to do a little bit of stuff up front, but I want to go ahead and get started with Lee Camp, and then we'll go ahead and go through the different pieces of the show. Okay, so let's get busy, and welcome to El Señor Camp. Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. We are here today with Lee Camp. Lee Camp is a stand-up comedian and a political satirist. He is the host of Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp on RT America. He created the Common Censored podcast along with Eleanor Goldfield, which focuses on grassroots activism issues. Camp is the author of the new book, Bullet Points and Punchlines. After you take a look just of that table of contents, you're going to say, all in one place? I got to go ahead and get this thing, man. Anyhow, Lee Camp, welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today, buddy?
Thanks. I'm doing well. I think by the end of this interview, we'll have that earth behind you all fixed up.
Well, yeah, I think that's what we're getting to, because let me tell you something. In reading the foreword to your book, right, you got the best. I really love Chris Hedges. That's one of my guys, okay? I've interviewed him a couple of times. I like his point of view, all of that. And here's what he said in the foreword to your thing. I know you said it, but the audience doesn't know it. There are two types of comics. There are those who focus on the foibles and excesses of the powerful, and there are those such as Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore, as well as the late George Carlin, who focus on how the powerful are the public face of oppression and exploitation. If anybody wants to hear something, that is what you want to hear, especially in these times. So before we get into the meats, the guts and bolts of these issues, who the hell is Lee Camp?
Well, I don't know. You put me on the psychiatrist couch. I might start weeping quietly here in a moment. But no, I think, yeah, Chris has a great point that, I've been a touring comedian for over 20 years, so I've met all kinds of comedians, and it's not that they're not talented, it's not that they're not funny, but there's many out there that are pretend as if they're addressing some sort of, politics or something, but they're not really going at the powerful. They're not really going at the core of the issues. They'll have a few Trump jokes here or there. And, this is what we have now filled our late night television with. It's just, standard Trump jokes. Before that, it was, standard Bush jokes or whatever, some Obama jokes, but it never really gets at the core of the issue of our ruling elites, the oligarchy in which we now live, the crumbling of any remnants of democracy, the military-industrial complex that is funded more largely than most nations. It doesn't get at all of that. It just says, oh, that guy acted funny or that guy tweeted something funny, which is not really challenging the powerful.
Now, here's the funny thing, all right? You gave a symptom of a problem. The symptom of this problem is they are saying what they are allowed to say, given the avenues that they are using to transmit what they want to put out there. And here comes the sticky point that I'm going to hit up with you. You are on this network called RT America.
Haven't heard of it.
And, it's funny because, I get a lot of flack. In fact, after I present this interview, I will get a lot of flack. But
you seem tough. I feel like you can handle it.
Oh, you bet your life I can. But it is interesting because here's the deal. A lot of the reasons you are able to say the things that you say is because you are using a platform. And it's not necessary that you like any platform, because you should not like any platform. You are just using things as a medium. But you're able to say what you want to say.
Yeah, and it's incredibly rare. I had given up the idea, like I said, to stand-up comic for 20 years. I had given up the idea of ever having a television show because the corporate networks are not going to allow the things I talk about. They might allow a little criticism of Amazon here or there, a little criticism of an oil industry here or there, but they're not going to allow it to be the main message of what you're talking about is the corporations extracting the wealth in our country and leaving people miserable and poor. And, they're not going to let you go at their advertisers on a daily basis. And so I had given up with the idea that I would be on TV that much or especially ever have a show. So I ended up in this bizarre scenario where at RT America, I am allowed complete freedom. And here's another unusual point of my comedy. I write everything I say. I research everything I say. Unlike all these other comedy news channels. And I'm not saying they're bad comedians. I'm just saying, you know, that if I say something, I wrote it. No one's writing my scripts. No one's telling me what to say. No one's ever told me not to say something. It really is complete freedom. And you compare that to what you see from even just newscasters on MSNBC. I mean, the number of people they've fired for pushing a little too hard against their borders, such as Ed Schultz,
To some extent, Shank Core.
Phil Donahue, Cenk Uygur, you can go down the list. Jesse Ventura, actually, many people don't know, he had a multi-million-dollar show with them, and they found out he was against the Iraq War, and he was paid millions of dollars just to get out of his contract, just to go away and not talk about it.
That shows a power.
Yeah, the power and how scary it is to even MSNBC. We're not even talking about like Fox News, but even just MSNBC, how scary it is for them to have anyone who's anti-war. It cannot happen on their airwaves. And so it is incredibly rare that I have this ability to be free and talk about what I want and cover what I want. And like you said, when you do, you will get attacked maybe just for having me on your show. And imagine the attacks I get, and it's by design. You know, when you really stand up against war on a large platform and stand up against the corporate entities that really rule our world, the white blood cells will activate and they will attack the infection. And anyone speaking for peace is the infection. And those white blood cells are the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, Fox News, all of them. And they will not put up with it.
Actually, I'm glad that you brought those news rags up. I use all of them, including every single one that I've seen you use annotated with all your articles. And what I want people that are listening to understand, right, is the things that you write about, these articles that you write about. I mean, look, I'll be frank. There are a couple of them that I am not 100% in agreement of, but if that were the case, we would have cults and not intellectual discussions. Okay? Sure. Now, that said, all of your articles are well annotated, but not only that, they're not using singular sources, which means you are using the plethora of avenues of news sources out there, something that we don't do in America. We go overseas and we see articles that also gives a presentation of news. You can't just look at people with an agenda, our current news rags, to do that. So I would urge people to take a second look. One of the things that I promised to do with Politics Done Right is always to keep that door open for voices that are not heard in general. And again, we take hits for that, but the thing about it is, you generally take the hits after the voices are heard. And when you throw something out of the bag, it's already out of the bag, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's important, and I think that people, even on smaller platforms, if they're talking about these things, it's why you're seeing movements like Black Lives Matter and defund the police, and you create a thought seed in people's minds that can grow. And so, you know, ultimately, when I was deciding whether I even wanted to create a show at RT America, when they offered it to me, what my main decision or a big point of it was, I don't think we have a lot of time left. You know, look at the photo behind you. Like that, I know that I get that that's a hyperbole, but it's not far off. You know, a lot of the world is on fire right now. And we don't have a lot of time to screw around. So if everyone who actually is speaking for peace, who actually is against war, pro-war propaganda, who's actually wants people, you know, everyone to not be living in poverty and to have a roof over their head and things like that, and if all those people waited for the perfect opportunity to ever speak out, for the perfect platform that is, you know, solely run by vegan, multicultural people with, you know, who struggle with Asperger's, you would never have it. It would never exist. There'd be no place to ever speak your mind. So the truth is, in order to speak out within our unfettered capitalist system, you have to live in that world, and you have to try and get the message out on the platforms available.
Hey, Lee, some funny just came out, man. You actually left the politics for a while and some funny came out, brother. What's up with that?
Well, don't ask me serious questions if you don't want serious answers.
Anyhow, hey, listen. I'm gonna tell you first of all, folks. Let me tell you the book that you're gonna see on the screen right now. Notice the congruence between the picture of his new book, this background here. You know, guess what? It's all by accident, but it also shows something that is very important. We are all coming to the same conclusions. We're all coming to the same conclusion. Lee, tell me now a little bit about these articles in the book. As I said, a lot of it is not new to me because I've read your articles before. I've reblogged your articles before because I think you're a damn good writer.
Thanks.
And not only are you a damn good writer, and folks, yes, I'm saying that about Lee Camp, but he researched what he writes. And in these days where everybody tries to censor what they're, and a lot of times self-censoring, he doesn't. Tell us a little bit about what you wrote about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some comedy in there as well, but the points of the articles are dead serious, and I tried to hit mainly on the things people don't know. So I spent more time on that than you know, things that I might believe that are obvious, you know, like Trump is a moron, or Joe Biden is a racist, or, you know, whatever. So while I may know those things, I feel like people already know those things. So I focused on things I felt like people did not know, like the $21 trillion of unaccounted for adjustments in the Pentagon's budget. And there's now, by the way, since that article, there's now reports that it's even higher than that. But it is, and that's trillion with a T. I mean, for people that haven't read about this is the Pentagon's own budget, you know, own financial analysis. This is not coming from some blog. This is their own analysis, showing that they have $21 trillion or more of unaccounted for adjustments. No one knows where this money's flying, what's happening to it. It's absolutely insane, and you can hardly get a politician or someone in a, you know, one of the legacy media outlets to even talk about it, other than to write a one-paragraph article where they try and pretend it's nothing. So it truly is incredible. Other things I cover in there are, you know, the 18 biggest things that WikiLeaks revealed to the world, because most people, obviously, Julian Assange continues to be persecuted, and most people don't know the totality of what WikiLeaks has revealed. Not a word of it has ever been proven false, meaning everything they've ever published is correct, which is the opposite track record of CNN or Fox News or something. And the things they revealed, which have changed the world, you know, they revealed what was in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They revealed internal documents about governments around the world, not just America. We're talking Britain, Australia,
Panama Papers.
Peru. What's that?
Panama Papers.
The Panama. Well, I don't think they revealed the Panama Papers. I think.
Oh, wasn't okay.
That might have been someone else, but yeah, they've done incredibly important stuff. And it's like people, you know, people like to think, oh, he's imprisoned because he was out to get America and now they've stopped him. But he was pro-transparency of all governments. I mean, he revealed things about Australia, Britain, Russia, China. And that is why these governments, Britain, Australia particularly, are not assisting in freeing a publisher. Anyway, so I get into that. But yeah, I really try and focus on things people don't just kind of commonly know. And
well, I think you're missing an important thing you covered too, Lee, and that's talk about coups.
What's that?
About coups.
Coups.
C-O-U-P, C-O-U-P.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do talk about, especially, you know, the ones the U.S. has backed or tried to create, you know, in Venezuela, putting up this ridiculous puppet, you know, so-called
Guaido.
president. He claims he's president despite the fact no one's ever elected him president. Not a single vote has been cast for Juan Guaido as president. And we now know his connections to big oil and everything else. You know, John Bolton, when he was in the Trump administration, publicly on Fox News says we want to get into Venezuela to get the oil. They're not even keeping this stuff a secret now. It's truly horrific.
Now, Lee, let's talk about, you know, we know the problems. Anybody wants to see all the problems, they can go to your book now. They should actually get, this type of writing, these types of articles are right down the center of my heart because, again, I think these are things that all Americans, if they knew, they would make different choices in who they elected. So we know that. So this is a good primer for Americans to find out all the things that they generally don't hear in the mainstream media. And even though a lot of this material is sort of in an ancillary way covered in some of the mainstream media, they're there for completeness but hidden. So we know that a lot of this is exposed. You expose it in your book. Hedges and others do the same. Where do you see us going from here? What is your opinion of a next step in the activist community to actually not be able to throw our hands up and scream and say, these are the bad things happening? How do we actually effect change?
Well, I think you could see, we probably should, model that have been successful and the organizers out there that are creating successful movements and large scale movements. We saw, it's obviously not over, but we saw how quickly the discussion around policing in America has changed over just a matter of months. Whereas for years, activists have been trying to get politicians in this state or that state to enact real change, to change our police system, and it just doesn't happen. But when you have millions of people out on the streets, all of a sudden you see a quick adjustment of what people are willing to talk about, the discussions they're willing to have. And obviously it has to continue. You can't just get Black Lives Matter written on a street and then go home. But I think it needs to be modeled after the successes. Another huge success has been, we're seeing the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, the Dominion and Duke Energy have thrown in the towel on that one. And the reason they threw in the towel is because of a combination of protesters stopping pipelines with protests and lawsuits have just made it too expensive to keep trying to put in this billion-dollar pipeline. So there are big wins right now against big oil because the big oil structure is collapsing, and we need it to collapse so that the whole planet's not on fire in a few years. These are pivotal times, but I think we need to look to the activists that are not just making it about electoral change. Yes, vote. Yes, we should try and beat what's stolen in the vote, especially in local races. Politicians can be important and can be rightfully elected. But if that's your only focus, then you're not actually creating change. Our focus needs to be much larger than just electoral politics.
Expand on that. The focus should be larger than electoral politics. Other than electoral politics, how do we further effect change? I know what we're doing on the streets are actually affecting electoral change. What else can we do?
Well, the big win I just said was these protesters in the pipelines. That came through a combination of the courts and protesters literally sitting in front of construction equipment and saying, you got to run me over, and they were arrested, and they sometimes they end up facing lengthy lawsuits and crap like that. But it has slowed down the oil companies to the point that they have thrown in the towel on that one, and other ones are facing other legal problems. Dakota Access was just put on hold. Keystone Pipeline was just put on hold. So anyway, I was just using those as an example of a tactic that is working.
I like that because you said what I was hoping that you'd say. In effect, there's electoral politics and there's also disruption. And because the capitalist necessity of some sort of order, they have to slowly attempt to accommodate. I tell you something, I was surprised how fast the system reacted, starting with the police and George, but I think I don't know if you've thought about this. I think there's some internals within our CIA and intelligence infrastructure that saw a whole lot of happenings. No government reacts as fast as I saw them react to start making changes wholesale across the country. There's something else out there that, in my opinion at least, we don't know about that causes a Biden to come out and say, well, if the politicians are not tearing down statues, and I know we don't necessarily need only tearing down statues, but we need to tear down statutes. But I mean, it is funny that Biden comes out and says, well, if the politicians don't do it, can you really blame the people who are doing it on their own? That was kind of strange to me.
Well, I think, you know, he's a little bit scared. I've been critical of him for, he basically says he supports Black Lives Matter, yet as far as I've seen, he hasn't come out in favor of almost any policy of Black Lives Matter. So, you know, Biden, they're hoping Biden will just roll into the White House without having to actually stand for anything, which I think is pretty pathetic. But you're right that a lot of politicians have quickly changed their tune, and it's because they started to fear for the kind of business as usual. I mean, you interrupt business as usual, and you'll see change rather quickly. Another important step, I think, is to really make certain brands toxic if they're not treating people right. A good one that everyone's been working on right now is Chevron, because Chevron has this lawyer, Stephen Donziger, that they've had under house arrest for a year now for basically winning an environmental lawsuit against them. And anyway, you make these brands toxic enough, and they will either have to sell or they'll have to change. Monsanto became so toxic, the brand, that they had to sell to Bayer. And now Bayer is facing billions of dollars in lawsuits for the carcinogenic Roundup herbicide. So it's kind of a combination of activists on the ground and lawsuits.
Now, Lee, before I ask you to tell us about the different ways people can reach you, the different ways people can see you, talk to you, etc., what would you have liked me to ask you that I haven't asked you?
Oh, man. That is a tough one. I'm trying to think of the stuff I've been talking about the most. You know, I've been talking a lot about propaganda. I have a comedy special people can watch for free at leecampamerican.com. And in that, I address policing. And one of the things I talk about is how when you know, we've moved the conversation to defund the police. But I think what the conversation should get to eventually is about 90% of what police do should not be done by police. It should not be done by guys with guns who are steroided up and, you know, just sent into situations to you know, deal with a mentally ill person who's pissing in a fountain. Like, that should not be done by guys with guns. And so we need to decrease our police forces by 95%. And it should be mostly, you know, call people that have mental health training, call people that deal with traffic violations, but they don't have guns. Like, there's just so many large scale steps to our policing system is ridiculous. And I want to hear that discussion.
Excellent. Now, tell us all about where they can reach you. Give us your website, your podcast, all that good stuff, because you have a lot to add to this discussion, brother.
Yeah, I have two podcasts, free podcasts every week. One's Common Censored with Eleanor Goldfield, and a new one is called Government Secrets with Graham Elwood. Also, my TV show Redacted Tonight. Everyone can get it at leecamp.com. And my Twitter's at leecamp. And like I said, I have the book, which you can find at leecampbook.com. And the new comedy special that's free for the first time is at leecampamerican.com.
Lee Camp, author of the new book, Bullet Points and Punchlines. Folks, go get it. Thank you so kindly for being with us, Lee.
Appreciate it.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That is Lee Camp. We go back kind of a long time, back in the DC days when Move to Men were doing all their stuff and all of that. He and both Eleanor Goldsfield, who does quite a bit of work in the activist world, and I mean the real activist world. Man, these are things that we're going to have to get busy with. Look, I want to show you something about Donald Trump and his coercion. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side. But beforehand, of course, I got to tell all my buddies hi. Michael Rudnin, welcome aboard. Let's talk about Rose William, welcome aboard. Let's see, John Trott, he says, hello, Egbert. Egbert was my dad, I'm Egberto. All right, Yuckfish, true. You agreed with something that he had to say. Then, of course, we have Paul Fleming. We have Dimitri OG, ¿cómo estás, mi hermano? We have Bruce Pollard, how you doing, Brewski? Well, I don't use that word anymore because it was wrong. Anyhow, Deidre, how you doing, Deidre? Scott, welcome aboard. AVQ, welcome aboard. And of course, Norman Reynolds, how you doing, Norman? John Trott, welcome aboard. Look, folks, we are going to have a great continued show. We still have a few minutes that we can give some good stuff. Good stuff. Anyhow, I want you to take a listen to this, and then we'll take this. Well, I tell it on the other side, and then I'll tell it also on the other side. Here we go. You know, the media is starting to do a very good job in the way they're covering Donald Trump, but I think that the one part that is still missing is they don't go into the evil portion that governs many of the policies that Donald Trump is attempting in order to get this economy open. What I want to do is I want to show you this piece, and then we'll take it on the other side.
And universities and states are beginning to take legal action against the Trump administration's new immigration policy targeting international college students. The ICE mandate directs international students enrolled at universities to take at least one in-person class or lose their visas and leave the country. But many schools have announced they are switching entirely to remote learning this fall. Acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security Ken Cuccinelli said the policy should motivate schools to reopen despite a spike in coronavirus cases across the country.
Now setting the rules for one semester, which we'll finalize later this month, that will again encourage schools to reopen.
After those comments, Harvard, MIT, and other schools started legal action to protect thousands of their students. Now California is joining in on the fray, becoming the first state to file a lawsuit against the new policy. It is the state's 86th lawsuit against the Trump administration. Joining us now is California Attorney General Javier Becerra. Mr. Attorney General, always good to have you. Thank you for being here. As a state, California has the most international students in the entire country, 185,000. You call this policy cruel, but you also call it arbitrary. What exactly is the legal action you're taking, and why do you think it's going to be successful?
Well, because it's arbitrary, and therefore it is placing a lot of people not only in danger of losing the opportunity that the federal government just 3 months ago told them they had, but it's also dangerous. Arbitrarily, it causes danger not only to those students, but think about the professors that would be required to be now in person in class. Think about all the students that would be susceptible to contagion. And so it's not just arbitrary in flip-flopping from a previous order that said that these students could continue forward through online classes, but it's arbitrary in that it didn't take into account the dangers that it poses, not just to these students, but to everyone who would be around the classroom setting.
Here's what I wish they would have noticed. If you listen to what Ken Cuccinelli said, well, we are doing this to force, in effect, these schools to open, encourage them to open, coerce them to open. They are not asking any of the fundamental questions. In this particular locale, can they open without causing harm? Can they open without getting other people sick? Can they open without putting the risk of teachers at health, without the risk of bus drivers at health? If you are in a stable condition, you can understand, yes, you can consider opening because, yes, the kids need to be in school. And yes, until people or kids go to school, having the parents go to work is going to be a difficult task. But you have to ask, what is the underlying issue for Donald Trump, why he's doing this hastily? Look, if we had shut the whole thing down, let's say in late February, early March, and we had taken full control nationally, it was a national action to take care of coronavirus, then it would be easy then to say, we are ready to open back up this country. We're ready to open back up and kids go to school. Why? Because we would have had the rates low enough that we could have had contact tracing, where whenever we get a fire, we could, or a little brush fire, we could put it out before it became a forest fire. But we didn't do that. We wanted the stock market to stay going up. And in the process, we've murdered thousands of Americans. So let's be clear here. This is a time when Americans are supposed to react. It is your life over Trump's success. It is your life over Trump not accepting that he's an imbecile. It is your life over Trump somehow thinking that he's really a good president of the United States. And what is interesting about all of this, right, is that yesterday now on this, yesterday Chuck Todd did some of his, what I would call better questioning. In other words, he left the leash long enough for the guy to set the trap for this guy. I want you to listen to this as far as, wait a minute, why is it we are this way and others are not? Check it out. Chuck Todd asked the pertinent question today to the Admiral, Assistant Secretary for Health. And you know what? I want you to listen to this. We'll take it on the other side.
The president himself has been at times acting like almost an opponent to mask wearing. How much did that set us back, this political debate about mask wearing over that 3-month period?
Well, I think the public health people have been very, very clear that mask wearing is essential. It's very important that we can really decrease the transmission, combined with the testing that we have right now to tell us exactly when a hot spot is starting. And our commercial labs have done a great job in doing that, doing about half our testing. Combining with that, we have a really good signal radar to know where to surge in, combined with the techniques that we have. And again, we're sending out COVID response assistance teams. We sent it out to 10 different locations last week. We're going to do another 9. That's 19 major metroplexes. You know, we know what to do with this, but we've got to have people on board doing it. And if you do get sick, the good news is we know how to treat you better on the ventilator. We have dexamethasone, remdesivir. The mortality rate is going very, very much down. But all this, look, I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture, but we are definitely in a better spot than we were in March and April, but we have to take this incredibly seriously, and I think everyone in the country is doing that.
Admiral, I understand that you believe in, and I'm sure on logistics that we are in a better place, that we have some of these things that we've streamlined this process. But results, sir, look at Europe and look at us. Why are we have such a different and poor outcome than Europe?
Well, first of all, if you look at much of Europe right now, you're seeing some resurgence in cases. So I think the book is still out on that. This virus is not done with humanity yet.
Results, sir. Look at the EU and look at us. Results matter. But you know what? The Admiral says, I am not trying to give a rosy picture after he kind of gave a rosy picture. This is all the administration has been all about. We've done X, Y, and Z. We've always done X, Y, and Z. Don't we understand that doing X, Y, and Z too late on something that expands exponentially is always going to be too late, and the results you get is what we're seeing here. Incompetence and non-science-based analyses and suggestions of how to present solutions is the issue. We need a new government. We need people who are basing their actions on science, and we need to keep people in power who are going to educate and not fool people just for the sake of capital, just for the sake of keeping an economy open. If Sweden is going to be a good example for us, it should be. Their debts 6 to 12 times anywhere around the Scandinavian countries. And secondly, their economy is doing no better than if they had done the right things and saved a whole lot of lives. Now, and then, of course, we know what's necessary. A wholesale dumping of folks from a particular party and the ascendant of those. And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but I want to play this and then I want to get into a little bit on this in a deeper manner. Former Republican operative Steve Schmidt have been knocking the president for a long time, but today his rant on Chris Hayes was on the Republican Party and Republican senators proper. It's a hell of a rant. You've got to listen to the whole thing, but I want you to do me a favor. Listen to the whole thing, and right after it, I have a very important commentary that I have to come out with. Please stick around. Let's get busy and check this out.
The party is irredeemable. It's become a threat to America's institutions, to small L liberalism. It is an authoritarian-ish party, not so different than the parties that we see in Hungary or Poland. It's no longer fidelitous to the American system, to the American Constitution. Really what it is an organized conspiracy to maintain power. Now, the good news is tonight, when you look out across the Senate races, Joni Ernst in Iowa has fallen behind. The Cory Gardner race in Colorado is effectively over. Martha McSally is almost certain to lose. And when you talk about the aforementioned Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, he's running against a Democratic challenger, a Black American, Jamie Harrison. And Jamie Harrison has a real chance to win in South Carolina because voters understand what a fraud Lindsey Graham is, that he's played them for fools for many, many years, and that people, generally speaking, in this country don't like it when their politicians take them for fools, look them in the eye and lie to them the way that Lindsey Graham has. They don't appreciate his betrayal of his former best friend, his embrace of his new best friend. And so wherever we look, we see a party that has been an agent, that has been collaborationist along with Donald Trump in wreaking the damage that we've seen in this country. And again, we are the epicenter of coronavirus death and suffering. We'll have 200,000 dead Americans by the time we make it to the election. We have a shattered economy with 40 million Americans out of work. We see the wholesale corruption of the loan process where so many small businesses couldn't access the money, but so many cronies of President Trump could. And the collapse of the Republican Party, its putrefaction, its descent into the cesspool is a real tragedy for the country. And we see it playing out now every day. And I'm reminded of the great phrase by the late, great Democratic Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who talked about defining deviancy down. And we've seen years now in the Republican Party of defining deviancy down, is that these senators will explicate Donald Trump on any issue. We saw Joni Ernst last week being asked a question about how Donald Trump is doing on the coronavirus response, and her absurd answer was, I think the president is stepping forward, intimating that he's somehow doing a good job. And of course, it's all theater of the absurd. None of this stuff is possibly justified. His conduct is abhorrent. He's desecrated his office. But more than that, he's literally, without exception, he's the worst leader in the history of the United States in a moment of crisis who was ever charged with any responsibility. And for all of these years, there's no action by Trump that any of these senators can find it in their hearts to condemn. What they're outraged about is that they've all bought their ticket and they're about to take the ride from groups like the Lincoln Project that have spent a lot of money telling the truth on them and their records to their voters, and they're outraged about that. I think there's no premise more offensive than that these Republican senators are somehow hostages to the Trump regime and to Donald Trump. They're vested with significant constitutional power, significant institutional power. And in the case of Hawley and Cruz, not only are they demagogues and silly people, they're just empty vessels that care nothing for the ideas and ideals of the country. What they care about is their privilege, their power, their position. They would be comfortable as apparatchiks in any authoritarian regime from time immemorial to forward. They're not in it to defend any high principle. They're not in it to advance any great cause. They're not in it to make the country better. They're small and silly men at a serious hour, and that's the crisis we have in the country. It's a crisis of unseriousness. It's a crisis of cowardice. Think of the guts and the courage of a Rosa Parks compared to these people. The country has no chance of recovering from any of this until he's removed from power. And when we're sitting in November, the Republican Party is going to be more resembling a smoldering ash heap than a political party, and everyone will sit around scratching their heads, and how did this happen? It happened because it became a principleless, authoritarian-ish party headed by a con man from New York City who has debased, desecrated, and defaced our institutions now for years, and the American people are going to fire him because of it.
Now, let's be clear. Steve Schmidt, he is a conservative Republican. One of the reasons that he's teaming up with Democrats and others right now is the sole purpose now is to get rid of Donald Trump. One of the reasons that they're attacking all the Republican senators that have been sycophants to Donald Trump as well is because the intent here is to reconstitute the Republican Party. Do not sit back and believe there is any sort of a symbiotic relationship between the values of what Democrats believe in, meaning progressive Democrats, and the values of a Steve Schmidt or other Republicans right now that are doing their utter best to get rid of the Republicans who are on the Trump bandwagon. So I want to make it clear to people, we team up with these folks to get rid of Donald Trump. But after that has been done, it is essential that we move right back to what we believe in, what progressives believe in, because while they will be of assist to get rid of Donald Trump and destroy what remains of their party, they would like to use that 4 years not to lose all the values that they believe in, conservatism that doesn't serve the masses. They will be still there trying to curtail what Democrats are all about, meaning progressive Democrats are all about. And if we fall for that stick, what we are going to do is we are not going to serve the American people the way that we need to, the way that we should. And then in the reconstitution of the Republican Party in 2024, they will sweep everything because they would have then changed the narrative to these left-wing Democrats could not accomplish the things that we need to accomplish. Bring the new Republican Party in. And we, the new Republican Party, the party not of Donald Trump, but we've got rid of all the Donald Trump sycophants, and now we will come in as the responsible people to change the process. When you see something like this, where even Ann Coulter comes out, and Ann Coulter says, the lovely Amy McGrath is a Marine Corps veteran. The average donation to her campaign is $36. Mitch McConnell is a broken down old man owed by cheap labor lobbyists. Now, think about that. Ann Coulter is suggesting that Amy McGrath, a Democrat from Kentucky, be elected to the Senate. We cannot be fooled by what is occurring here. What is occurring here is the reconstitution of the Republican Party on the backs of Democrats who they will hold in esteem for the next 2 and 4 years to then throw it out the door and ensure that progressive values are not really attained. We got to play this very smart, people. We've got to play this very, very smart. And I noticed that before Michael Rudnin heard the end of it, Michael Rudnin was right on point. I want to read what Michael Rudnin said. He said, let's see, I got to run to it. ¿Dónde está? ¿Dónde está? In effect, what Rudnin said was, please, folks, do remember that those guys who make up the Lincoln Project are nothing more than neocons. And he is absolutely right. But you know what? We can use them now. We need them now. We need them in case we have a drop-off in our votes. We still have Republicans that are willing to go for Biden. And one of the reasons a lot of people like Biden, is because, okay, he's a, look, for all my Democratic listeners who are going to say, Berta, you can't say anything that loses a chance for us to win. I'm not doing that. But let's be frank. Biden is a neocon. Clinton was a neocon. All of that's true. That doesn't mean that if they're in power as progressives, we couldn't curtail what they were doing, which is what we're going to have to do when Biden wins in 2020. We are going to have to curtail him from any endeavors that he may have overseas, which the world is in such dire straits right now. We may not even have enough healthy people in America to go fight any wars. So, that's probably out the door. Anyway, Mike Norman says, thanks, Egberto, but it's worse. These guys from the Lincoln Project and the Bulwark podcast would have supported everything Donald Trump has done if it was Jeb Bush in office. That is very true, Norman. Absolutely true. What is also true is Joe Biden would have supported much of that as well. So, when I want people listening here, I want them to be well-informed. And the reason I want them to be well-informed is that when Joe Biden becomes president, we will immediately, those of us on the progressive side, will have to throw some very long fishing nets or fishing lines to drag him in. Because remember, he believed in things like chain CPI. He was going to get Obama to go sign off chain CPI. And we could go ahead and name item after item after item after item. But he is the guy that's going to carry the ball. And after he carries the ball over, we're going to get that fishing line and reel him in. So, folks, you go out there and do the right thing. All right. Now, Biden, I've always been concerned about how Biden is going to perform on stage. He did a performance on stage recently, teleprompter as well. But I think if he's managed well, he'll do well. I want to show you what I'm talking about, and then I want to show you something that Zerlina Maxwell had to say. Whoop, I got to go pretty quickly. Let's get busy. Here you go.
We have an economic crisis that's left almost 18 million Americans out of work, with some of the greatest pain inflicted on small businesses and communities of color. He promised to bring back jobs, but manufacturing was in recession even before COVID-19. He promised to buy Americans, but then he let federal contractors double the rate of offshoring jobs in his first 18 months. When it comes to COVID-19, after months of doing nothing other than predicting the virus would disappear, or maybe if you drank bleach, you may be okay, Trump has simply given up. He's waved the white flag. He's walked away. Our president wasn't prepared for this pandemic. He ignored the detailed briefings and warnings that our administration left behind. The threat of a pandemic we told him was coming. We gave all this to his administration in transition. But he shut it all down. He shut down the pandemic office we had inside the White House. He praised the Chinese government even as the virus was coming to our shores because he was so afraid that they'd walk away from his trade deal that cost us significant amounts of money as well. Let's not get caught flat-footed again.
Now, those of us that are like real deep down activists, we may say, yeah, we know that and that so forth. But that speech wasn't made for us. That speech was made for a group of folks, both centrist Democrats and Republicans that are what we call moderate Republicans that just don't like Trump. That really is the tipping point that they would need not to vote for Trump, because he enumerated it pretty nicely. Pretty nicely. Let me play Zerlina real quick because she has something important to say, and then we'll talk about. Zerlina Maxwell made a commentary on this week, and I think people have to take a deeper look at what she's saying. Let's go ahead and listen to it, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Zerlina, one of the things we've been seeing, though, from the president is a focus on other issues. Of course, that Friday night commutation of Roger Stone's sentence. Any sense from you that that could work for him politically?
No, I don't think that's going to be beneficial to the president. I think it reminds the American people that this president has been impeached. You had a Republican, Mitt Romney, the only senator to vote for conviction, come out saying that this is unprecedented, historic corruption. That's a quotable. That's something the American people understand. And to the point about the vision for the future, the current situation is going to dictate what the future looks like. If we don't get the virus under control in the states currently that are experiencing spikes, I'm the daughter of a biologist, George. If we don't get that under control, then we are not going to be able to have much of a robust future and economic growth going forward, because again, all of these crises are interconnected and the president has been incompetent in dealing with them. He stood up in front of a podium and told people to inject disinfectant, talking about putting the president in spaces where he can or cannot be effective, to the governor's point. But I just want to say that when we're talking about voters and how Joe Biden can reach out and speak to that Democratic base, we're forgetting about the fact that the Democratic base in this current moment in 2020 is women of color. Black women vote 6 points higher than the national average. We turn out at nearly 70% of the time in each election. And that's something that Joe Biden can focus on, that Democrats don't traditionally focus on this early in the election cycle. So invest early, message directly to communities that can turn out and tip the election in your favor, particularly in these critical battleground states like North Carolina. But don't forget Georgia, which is on the list as a state where the black vote can have a major impact.
Now, Zerlina, even here in Texas, it's up for grabs now, because of the change in demographics. And people like to just talk about change in demographics. It's not change in demographics. It's change in the actual people, the group of people, and what this group of people are really looking for. And that is that coalition, right? And that's what we're talking about here. So let's be clear on that. A lot of people, when the reason sometimes I talk about demographic differences as far as elections are concerned, but I think we concentrate too much on demographics in the manner that says, oh, if you're black, you're Democrat. If you're this particular kind of white, you're Republican. I am trying to change that narrative, to make that narrative that if we look at it for what the government is supposed to be doing for society as a whole, and we realize that the truity is that we have common interests, and where those interests diverge because of historical things, redlining, etc., we also have a government who is willing to mitigate those wrongs vis-a-vis having the honest discussion on reparations and other issues. Then we can start really having honest conversation. We're at the end of the show, folks. I want to remind all of you that this is a show that needs your support. So I ask you so kindly to consider becoming a subscriber of Politics Done Right. If you go to our Politics Done Right page, right, which is facebook.com/Politics Done Right, we now, I don't know if you've realized it recently, but we now can accept subscriptions from our page. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you all the links that you can do to support Politics Done Right. I'm going to start with Patreon. Patreon is a way that you support us like any other type of show like this. And you can find us at politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. You can support us at PayPal, either subscription or donations. That is at politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. You can also support us on Facebook. I mentioned that earlier up front, but this is a direct link, and that is politicsdoneright.com/Facebook. You can support us at our store. Well, let me first tell you. You can support our equipment fund, which is a GoFundMe equipment fund, and that is at politicsdoneright.com/GoFundMe. And you can shop at our store to make sure that you have some of our stuff. And what are some of our stuff? ¿Qué pasó? We have our As I See It, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom. You can also get, I've had my weight problems and I've solved them. How do I? Lose weight and be fit now. And of course, we got our cups. Politics Done Right. I support independent media. All of that is on our store. So you can either go to store.politicsdoneright.com or politicsdoneright.com/store. We also have t-shirts and all that good stuff with our stuff on there. Please support us. Make sure that we can continue to get these great guests. Make sure that we can continue to bring the truth out so that we don't have to fall for the crap many times we're forced to ingest, because there's not bad people. They just have to just do things the best they can. So we got to get out of here. But before I get out of here, every time I forget to put this on, here's a picture of our rolling, the stuff that you can get in our store right there rolling across the screen. Look, I know you have options. I know you can go anywhere. I know you can go anywhere on this internet to get any kind of information. I just am thankful that you've chosen us to be a part of. Those of you who can become subscribers, we have all kind of gimmies that we do when you join up. I have a little surprise that I'm working hard on. I'm working hard on this little surprise, and hope another week I may have it for you. But we'll see. But anyhow, my name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out. I'm Egberto Willies, host of Politics Done Right, an independent news program. I post several news videos of interest every day. I ask you so kindly to subscribe to my channel. And please leave me some comments. Thank you very much.